All right, hopefully you guys can hear me now. So redoing this video again, because the last video the picture was not showing. So check and see if it's working. Check and see. All right, so we're good to go. So I'm going to be discussing, of course, what I talked about in the last video, and that is going to be haplogroups, DNA, genetics, and who are the real Hebrews, and can we find out who the real Hebrews are? Just checking my sound is on. Oh, and it is. Okay. And I am checking the live chat now. So if there are people watching and you have a concern or question or my screen isn't showing, let me know and I'll be able to check it. So I'm just going to be coming at this from a scientific perspective. Don't really care about scripture, the Bible, or anything like that as of right now. There's a time and place for those type of discussions, but this discussion is strictly going to be in reference to the sciences. So when you start talking about people groups and genetics, different people groups are separated by haplotypes. And so a haplotype is a group of genes in an organism that are inherited together from a single parent. And a haplogroup is a group of similar haplotypes that share a common ancestor with a single nucleotide polymorphism mutation. So that is what you've got. So one of the best places to start when you're talking about who's Semitic of this land and what land belongs to who and where are these group of people from, the Hebrew Israelites claim that they are from Israel and that they are the true Israelites, descendants of the Mesopotamians. Is that true? Well, we know that Mesopotamia no longer exists, but it is located in modern day Iraq. And so, with that being said, we actually have a migration map thanks to DNA and evolutionary genetics. And if you are from Africa, you would have either L3, L, or LO. Um, so that would be your haplotype of that haplo group. And here is the, let me see. Yep, the human. So I had a real good chart. Let me see, because I had a real good chart earlier. Yeah, but L to 1-6, L 1-2, these are all black people. So if you have the if you're of the L haplotype group, is actually from Africa, right? So anybody in America that gets a DNA test and you have any of these in your haplotype, then you are of African descent. I actually want to bring up a reference for you guys. Or let me see. Let's see if I can bring up a reference for you guys so you guys don't just think I'm making this up. Nothing's coming up. I had a real good chart in the other video I was just showing too. It was a really good chart. Oh, here we go. So defining population. Haplogroups can be used to define genetic populations and are often geographically oriented. For example, the following are common divisions for mitochondrial DNA haplogroups: African, LO, L1, or I'm sorry, L0, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. West Eurasians, HT, UV, XKIJW, all listed West Eurasian haplogroups are derived from macro haplogroup N, and so on and so forth. So, when you're talking about, who's from where and these people aren't from here and et cetera, we can get a very good idea of where you're from based on your DNA. And when it comes to African Americans, right, when it comes to black people, so this is from Science Magazine, where they did a study recently. But researchers have found that a significant percentage of African Americans, European Americans, and Latinos carry ancestry from outside their self-identified ethnicity. So Hebrew Israelites are correct when they say you're not just black, you're something else. Yes, you are something else, but you are not a Hebrew. The average African American genome, for example, is nearly a quarter European, and almost 4% of European Americans carry African ancestry. And keep on going down to the meaty stuff. And right here, the average African American genome, for example, is 73.2% African, 24% European, and 0.8% Native American. And so, yes, you are not just black. You're also somewhat European and Native American. And so, sure, Hebrew Israelites are correct in that sense. That black people aren't just black. You are something else. To find out what that something else is, you most likely will have to get a DNA test. But on average, most African Americans are from Africa. Of course, because you're an African American. But in the human migration map, in this group, in group L. Now, this group over here, Middle East, when people migrated from Africa to the Middle East, these are the haplotypes of the Middle Eastern haplogroup, HJKNUVI. Now, if you want to find out who are the genetic, or as some people say, the Semitic people of the Middle Eastern Iraqi land, ways of finding that out. So for both mtDNA and y-DNA variation, the large majority of the haplogroups observed in the Iraqi population, H, J, T, and U, for the mitochondrial DNA, JM172 and JM267, which is for the y-DNA, are those considered to have originated in Western Asia, to have later spread mainly in Western Eurasia. And moving on down to the meaty stuff, most historians and anthropologists provide strong circumstantial evidence to posit that Iraq's Marsh Arabs share very strong links to the ancient Sumerians. Now, this is a paper that was written, and the research concluded that haplogroup J accounts for 55.1% of the Iraqi sample, reaching 84.6% in the Marsh Arabs. One of the highest frequencies reported so far. Unlike the Iraqi sample, which displays a roughly equal portion or proportion of J1 M267 particular to sub HGJ1 page 08, haplogroup E, which characterizes 6.3% of Marsh Arabs and 13.6% of Iraqis, is represented by EM123 in both groups. So basically, 84% of Marsh Arabs had 55% of the much they had 55% of the J gene in them, which is the closest of any other haplogroup. So these people are the closest to these people. So the people who the original, let's say the original J's, right? The original Middle Eastern Iraqi people, right? Who were of this haplogroup, right? So this type right here, J, the people that were tested today, their haplogroup wasn't L, it wasn't B or R, it was J. So the people in the Near East today, right, of haplogroup J are closely related to the original haplogroup J people. Just like if you were to take my DNA and test it, my haplogroup would come out as one of the L's. And so you could say that I am from Africa because I have a very high L haplotype. Therefore, my ancestry, my origins is in Africa. And so the people who live in, the Marsh Arabs, these people, the Marsh Arabs are close descendants of the Sumerians. So this is what the paper. This is what. Well, go to the title. So, in search of the genetic footprints of Sumerians, a Y chromosome and mcDNA variation in the Marsh Arabs of Iraq. And so that's the evidence that the Marsh Arabs are closely related to the Sumerians, which are the Mesopotamians. And so black people, you are not Hebrew Israelites. And I also have a little short video I want to show you guys, because one of the questions somebody asked me yesterday was, if these people are Semitic to the land, how come their skin color is different and blah blah blah. And I explained that natural selection plays a big role in that, and that person rejects natural selection, and they also reject evolution, which is weird because the founder of what we know as natural selection was a creationist. He believed in God. His name was Edward Blythe. But let me show you a video on how does melanin work? How does skin color work? Does your skin color mean you're a god? Does melanin mean that you are a deity?
All over the world. George then created a second map using measured skin colors and environmental data. It showed UV intensity does indeed predict skin color. Wherever UV is strong, skin is dark, like it is near the equator or at high altitude. At the poles, the skin of indigenous people is almost always lighter. That suggests that variation in human skin melanin production arose as different populations adapted biologically to different solar conditions around the world. As we've noted, our early ancestors probably had full body hair covering pale skin just like other primates. So when did the darker shades of human skin begin to evolve? DNA sequencing has made it possible to find evidence that can help answer that question. Rick Kittles is a geneticist who's skilled at deciphering such clues.
whenever a species undergoes some form of selection, some form of natural selection, evidence of that selection is found in the genome. And so as geneticists, we get really excited when we explore the genome for these signatures. One way in which that's done is by sampling worldwide populations and looking throughout the genome at variation and comparing across populations. And it's a very exciting process. I feel like a detective when I go through that process.
One of the many genes that genetic detectives have linked to human pigmentation is called MC1R. Sampling from around the world indicates there's a fair amount of variation in the DNA sequence of that gene, but not from every corner of the globe.
When we look at MC1R within African populations, we don't see a lot of diversity. And the particular allele that they have in those African populations is the one that codes for darker skin. MC1R codes for a protein which is involved in the switch from the production of pheomelanin to eumelanin. And we know pheomelanin is the reddish yellow pigment, and then the eumelanin is the brown-black pigment.
The absence of MC1R diversity in African populations indicates that, in that part of the world, there is strong negative selection against any alleles that would alter dark skin.
And it's not a mystery. It's not something we don't understand. We understand these things very well. And what I've noticed, people who hold to these conspiracy theories and these strange beliefs is that, number one, these groups go after people who are not educated on the subject they're talking about. Rule that a con man had, I don't remember his name, but J. Warner Wallace, I think he worked with the guy, and he was one of the greatest con men of our time. I forget his name right now, slipped my mind. It was the person who, they actually made a movie about it. It was called Catch Me If You Can. I'll Google him as I'm talking about him. But what he said is, if you're going to con somebody, make sure you know your product or whatever it is you're conning that person on better than they do. And so it's not that these people are actually correct. It's just that they know what they're talking about better than the people who they're getting sucked into this, conspiracy stuff or their cult or their religion. And so, rely on these people to get their information. Notice how these people are not well versed in what they believe. Also notice how when it comes down to arguing data and evidence with the people who reject the consensus, of the day and of the time, which is backed up by strong support and evidence, it seems to me that in all cases with these conspiracies, they all rely on special pleading. And so special pleading is when somebody rejects something where in any other case that circumstance would be accepted as truth, but in that particular case somebody will reject the evidence or the data in place of God, in place of a strange motive. For example, they might put a strange motive on a particular group of people. These people are just lying. They just don't want you to know the truth. And in any other case, that fact or the evidence would be concluded as the truth. But in that particular case, it's not true because of ... A really good example is with younger creationists. They reject that it takes starlight, billions of years to reach our planet. If a star is 10 billion light years away, that star must be 10 billion years old because the light from that star has been traveling for 10 billion years. Hence, based off the distance, we can determine the time, because space and time, as we know, is coherent together. So, with that being the case, what younger creationists will say, but God caused the light to get here faster, et cetera, et cetera. But God did this, but God did that, blah, blah, blah. Now, the data is clear as day, but the younger creationists will deny the data because of God. And in the same case with the Hebrew Israelites, I get that same feeling where in any other case, they would accept the data in any other, like, field of their life. Like if they were about to cook something and they thought one thing and I came with some counter data and I showed them and I said, well, this isn't the case, they would accept that. But when it comes to their doctrine, they won't accept the data because of God, because of this, because of that. And so that's one of the main objections. That's one of the main things that I've seen from them. And lastly, something that I've also noticed is with people being ill-educated on these subjects and people, um, not noticing that a lot of these beliefs are just falling back on the special pleading fallacy. One of the last things I've noticed about these beliefs and why people tend to go towards these beliefs is a lot of these different conspiracies, they all interconnect together. Like, notice how like the flat earthers are younger creationists, and the younger creationists are also intelligent designers, and intelligent designers, of course, deny evolution. But the intelligent designers think that there's a mass conspiracy in the scientific community, and the people who accept, or believe in the Illuminati, they have some weird beliefs. And I noticed, like with the Hebrew Israelites, they also believe in a lot of conspiracy theory. The people who I was discussing this with last night. So not only was their science wrong when it came to the genetics, and the funny thing is, the person I was talking to came to the right conclusion. He understood that if this data is correct, he is not an Israelite, but he wouldn't accept the evidence because he said that the scientific community is restricting, or they are keeping away information from the public, because the scientific community really knows that black people are the real Israelites. Funny, because flat earthers say the same exact thing. The scientists don't want you to know the earth is flat. But also, younger Christians say the same thing. The government does not want you to know that the earth is 6,000 years old. Intelligent designers say the same thing about evolution. Scientists don't want you to know that evolution is not true. Then, on top of that, do you also know that there are Chinese people who think they are the Israelites? There are Australian people who think they are the real Israelites. There are British Jews who are saying they are the true Israelites. So you have in those cases, if that really is the case, scientists are keeping away conflicting truths from the public. So what is the truth that the scientists are really trying to keep away from it? Are they trying to keep away from the public that the earth is 6,000 years old? Or are they trying to keep away from the public that Chinese people are really Israelites? These conspiracy theorists can't even make up their mind on what academia is keeping away from us, which is strange. Because if there really was a mass conspiracy, how come even all of the conspiracy theorists, their data doesn't even match up? Or even better, if what they're saying really is true, why don't you see people who don't believe in the theology at all, like atheists, coming out saying that the earth is flat, the earth is 6,000 years old, or that black people are the real Israelites? So in any other case, they would accept the evidence, but in this particular case, they don't. How younger creationists are fighting against flat earthers, and flat earthers are saying, well, if you believe the scientists on the shape of the earth, how come you don't believe the scientists on the age of the earth? So you can't go half and half. You do have to go all the way. It is all or nothing. And instead of going on to these weird conclusions, I think that is better to conclude that maybe the data is not incorrect, right? Maybe it's not the fact that God does not exist. Um, but maybe you just came to the wrong conclusion. Um, a principle that really helped me come out of younger creationism was the principle that God is not deceptive. This is something I learned from Ken Miller, who's a Catholic, when he was going over the evidence for human chromosome 2. And the evidence does show that humans are related to the great apes. And so either the data that we're getting is incorrect or God is deceiving us. And Ken Miller goes and he says, well, I don't believe in a deceptive God. And so with the evidence, or God is deceiving us, and you can say, maybe, God does not exist. But a much better conclusion to make is, of course, maybe you came to the wrong conclusion on this. Maybe you should take a step back. Maybe you should go back to the drawing board and come to a better conclusion. Maybe black people just are not Israelites, which is okay. I noticed that a lot of black people, over the years, we didn't like a lot of things about ourselves. We didn't like the way we looked. We didn't like our music. We don't like our culture for a long time, and especially with us not knowing who we were for a long time, where we came from, you could say. We've had our identity stripped from us, and we've been enslaved and shackled, and we've been told we weren't anything. And we finally do find out that we actually were the first people on the planet. We can't even accept that. We actually want to go. We want to steal these Marsh Arabs' identity, because that's what you're doing. If you're going around saying you are a Hebrew Israelite and you don't have any evidence to support that, you are stealing somebody else's identity. I don't understand why you just can't be happy with who you are. You're an African American. You're from Africa. Africa has a very rich history. If you don't know, Christianity has its roots in Africa. Ethiopia, proclaimed by King Uzziah in the 1st century, he made Ethiopia one of the first Christian nations. So you could say, in a sense, you could say that black people were the first group of people to bring in the worship of God, to love God, which is pretty amazing. So it's not the end of the world if you're looking at this video and you found out that you aren't Israelite. That's okay. Life still goes on. The Bible's still true. God is still real. God still exists. Jesus is still a son. But maybe you just came to the wrong conclusion. And that's why you can revise your hypothesis. You can, go back to the drawing board and come to a better conclusion after your hypothesis has been falsified. That's how science works. And that's pretty much it. Something that I always go over on my YouTube channel, my YouTube channel basically relies on 3 principles. God is not deceptive. And this 2 books. God has given us the book of nature and the book of scripture. And so if I never had a Bible and the Bible says something and made a scientific claim or something like that, and I look out in nature and I had my data from the natural world, claims to be should correspond with the evidence that I find in the natural world, because truth is that which comports with reality. And so God has given us the 66 books of the Bible, but he's also given us the book of nature, where we can put the Bible to the test. And it's such a beautiful thing when you can actually allow the Bible to be the Bible and let the science be the science. And I would say one of the last principles that my YouTube channel goes by or basically proclaims a lot is that no matter what we find, God is still the creator. This world is God's world, and no matter what we find in this universe. It may make us reconsider, think about God and how God does things and uses things in his creation, but it doesn't make us doubt God, and it shouldn't. This world is God's world. Whatever we find out, God knew about it billions of years before we did, and that's okay. The main point in case in Christianity is that Jesus is alive. So Christianity doesn't rely on the fact that the earth is 6,000 years old. It doesn't rely on the fact that evolution is true or not true. It doesn't rely on the fact that black people are Hebrew Israelites or whatever, or this and that. The main crux of Christianity is that Jesus is alive. Jesus, of course, was a real historical figure, lived and died and resurrected. And that's it. That's the Christian message. And when people go and they make these doctrines and they complicate things, it's a stumbling block. And Hebrew Israelite theology is a stumbling block, just like younger creationism is a stumbling block, and just like intelligent design is a stumbling block. And all of these things, I don't think they should be things that separate the church. If somebody came to me and they're a Christian and they believe in the Hebrew Israelite doctrine and theology, yes, I do think that it's not true, but at the same time, I don't think somebody's going to hell because they don't believe they're Israelite, or they do believe they're Israelite. And I do want to clarify, you can be a Jew and not be an Israelite. There are black Jews, there are white Jews, right? There are Chinese Jews. Judaism is a faith. It's not a race. But if you're claiming to be a Hebrew Israelite, the DNA is not on your side if you are an African American. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave some feedback in the comment section. Share this video with Hebrew Israelites you know, or maybe you know somebody who has discussions with Hebrew Israelites. Share the video with them. If you agree, if you don't disagree, comment below. But please, no special pleading, no scientists are conspiring against us and blah, blah, blah. Unless you have peer-reviewed data, scientific data, academic scholarship, I'm really not interested, because flat earthers are younger creationists. Even somebody claiming to be a Chinese Israelite, they can make the same argument. Empirical data or information, really not interested in those type of discussions. It's really unfruitful and not beneficial to any of us. And so with that being said, until next time, good luck and good night.